How to heal if you've loved an avoidant. So you fell for someone who kept you at arm's length. They showed up just enough to keep hope alive, then disappeared just long enough to leave you questioning everything. If you've ever loved someone avoidant, someone who feared closeness, shut down during emotional moments, or ran when you got too close, I want you to hear this. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to heal. Let's talk about it. When you love an avoidant, it feels like emotional whiplash. One moment you're deeply connected, the next, you're wondering if you made it all up in your head. And the worst part, you start to confuse inconsistency with intensity. You think the roller coaster means love, but it doesn't. Here's the true thing: avoidants are often deeply scared, not of you, but of the vulnerability that real intimacy requires. It's not that you weren't enough. It's that their walls were built long before you arrived. But your healing, that starts now. And it starts with this question: what part of me was trying to earn love instead of receiving it freely? Healing means returning to your worth. You have to stop making their fear of reflection of your value. You didn't fail. You felt. You gave. And now you grow. Love should feel safe. It should feel reciprocal, not like a maze you have to solve to be chosen. So what's next? You draw boundaries without guilt. You stop confusing distance with mystery. You make room for someone who shows up without hesitation. Most of all, you stop chasing people who need to lose you to value you. You don't heal by understanding them more. You heal by choosing you more. When you've loved someone who is emotionally avoidant, it's incredibly easy to mistake the emotional rollercoaster for something meaningful. One of the most common and dangerous patterns that forms in these relationships is confusing inconsistency with passion. You begin to interpret the highs and lows, the unpredictability, and the moments of withdrawal followed by sudden closeness as evidence of deep, magnetic love. It feels intense, almost addictive. And because of that, it starts to seem like it must be real. But here's the problem: emotional inconsistency isn't a sign of strong connection. It's a sign of emotional unavailability. Real passion, real love doesn't need chaos to feel alive. It doesn't need to keep you guessing or constantly anxious. What you're often calling passion is actually your nervous system reacting to instability. This isn't about you not. It's the emotional equivalent of shaky ground and telling yourself it's thrilling when deep down, you just want to feel safe. Inconsistent partners often create what feels like chemistry by withholding and then offering connection in small, surprising bursts. They pull away just long enough for you to panic, and then return just in time for you to feel relieved, grateful, even euphoric. This cycle mirrors the psychological principle of intimate reinforcement, a powerful force that makes us attach more deeply to people who give us unpredictable attention. Your brain starts working overtime to win their affection again because the reward feels so rare, and that scarcity makes it feel more valuable than it actually is. The tragedy is, you start equating anxiety with desire. You think, if they didn't matter to me, I wouldn't be this affected. Or, it's only this intense because the connection is real. But intensity created by fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of never being enough, is not love. It's survival mode. It's you trying to hold together something that keeps falling apart, not because you're doing it wrong, but because it was never stable to begin with. In a secure relationship, passion can still exist, but it's grounded, it's consistent. It doesn't leave you questioning whether your last conversation was a turning point or a goodbye. It doesn't demand that you earn affection every time the other person pulls away. When you stop confusing inconsistency with passion, you start to raise your standards. You begin to see emotional reliability not as boring, but as beautiful. You realize that safety is not the absence of love. It's the foundation of it. The most important shift you can make is realizing that peace in a relationship isn't a sign that something's missing. It's a sign that something healthy is being built. And you deserve that. You deserve a connection where intensity doesn't come conflict or confusion, but from two people who are emotionally present, available, and brave enough to stay close even when it's hard. Loving someone who is emotionally avoidant can feel like being in a constant state of pursuit. You're always trying to decode their silence, soothe their distance, and find the perfect way to make them feel safe enough to stay. Somewhere along the way, it becomes a mission, not just to love them, but to fix them. You start seeing their emotional unavailability not as a boundary, but as a puzzle you're meant to solve. But here's the truth that's both hard and freeing: they are not your project. It's incredibly tempting to believe that if you just love them enough, if you just say the right thing, stay calm enough during their shutdowns, and become the safe person they've never had, then maybe they'll finally open up. Maybe they'll change. Maybe they'll become the partner you see flashes of in your best moments together. That hope can feel noble, even romantic. But it's not love, it's a trap. And more importantly, it's not your responsibility. Avoidant people often have deep-seated fears about intimacy. These fears were usually formed long before you met them, often rooted in childhood experiences or past trauma. They may genuinely care about you, But caring isn't the same as being capable of creating a healthy relationship. You cannot heal someone else's fear of closeness by sacrificing your own needs. You cannot teach someone to stay by being the one who never leaves. All you're doing is teaching yourself to accept less than you deserve. When you treat someone as a project, even with the best intentions, you end up abandoning yourself. You stop asking, "What do I need?" and instead start asking, "What do they need so they'll finally love me back the way I want?" That shift pulls you further and further away from your center. You become someone constantly reacting to another person's wounds rather than responding to your own needs and desires. And here's the hardest part to accept: even if your love is patient, kind, consistent, and generous, it won't matter if they aren't ready. Healing can only happen when someone chooses it for themselves. Your presence, your effort, and your loyalty might give them comfort, but it won't give them the courage to change. That has to come from within them. And often, it comes long after, and sometimes only because you finally walk away. Letting go of the role of fixer is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself. You start to reclaim your energy, your self-worth, and your boundaries. You recognize that someone else's pain doesn't give them the right to mistreat you, confuse you, or keep you stuck in a dynamic that only takes. Healing doesn't come from proving you're the exception. It comes from honoring yourself enough to know you never needed to be. When you love someone who's emotionally unavailable or avoidant, it's easy to internalize their lack of closeness as a reflection of your own value. This isn't about you not. You start believing that if you were just a little more attractive, a little more patient, a little more easygoing, then maybe they would have stayed. Maybe they would have let you in. This belief system forms quietly, often without you realizing it, but it's toxic. It convinces you that being chosen is the ultimate proof of your worth. And that couldn't be further from the truth. Your worth isn't determined by who wants you, stays with you, or validates you. This isn't about you not. It's not something that fluctuates on someone else's ability or inability to love you well. Just isn't about you not. Because someone couldn't meet your emotional needs doesn't mean those needs were too much. It means they weren't equipped to meet them. That's about them, not you. But when you're in a relationship with someone avoidant, the reject doesn't come all at once. It's subtle, it's quiet. It comes in missed calls, in changing moods, in the emotional distance they place between the two of you. Sometimes they pull away just as things get close. Sometimes they stop talking when the conversation becomes too real. These moments of disconnect are so confusing because they often follow moments of intimacy. And that contradiction makes you start asking, what did I do wrong? You start adjusting. You dim yourself. You become more accommodating, more understanding, more careful not to push. You begin performing for love, trying to earn what should have been given freely. The harder you try, the more exhausted you become. And that exhaustion is a signal. It's telling you that you're trying to win someone who can't fully participate in the relationship. The truth is, someone else's fear of connection isn't a reflection of your desirability. It's a reflection of where they are in their emotional development. If someone keeps you at a distance, it doesn't mean you're unlovable. It means they're not ready to engage with love in a healthy, secure way. And your job isn't to twist yourself into someone they'll finally want. Your job is to stay grounded in your own value. Even when someone else doesn't see it, you have to learn to separate being loved from being chosen by someone unavailable, because the validation you're seeking from them is fleeting. Even if they do choose you temporarily, it won't feel stable. It won't feel safe. Why? Because your sense of self-worth will still be tied to their approval, and their approval is inconsistent by nature. This is not real. Healing comes when you decide to validate yourself without needing anyone else to co-sign your value. When you understand that being emotionally available and open isn't a weakness, it's a strength, and it deserves to be met with the same kind of openness and readiness in return. You don't have to keep proving your worth. You only have to start believing in it. When a relationship with an avoidant person ends, or even when you're still in it but constantly feeling confused and hurt, your natural instinct is to try to understand. You replay conversations, dissect every word, every silence, every emotional withdrawal. You tell yourself that if you can just figure out why they act this way, why they couldn't let you in, then maybe it will hurt less. Maybe you'll finally get closure. But here's the truth: healing doesn't come from more explanations. It comes from creating boundaries. The painful reality is that many avoidant people don't, or can't, give you the kind of emotional clarity you're craving. They don't always know why they feel overwhelmed by closeness. They might not even realize they're pushing you away until you're already halfway out the door. And even when they do understand their patterns, that insight doesn't always translate into action. That's why waiting for them to give you a satisfying explanation keeps you stuck. It delays your healing. It feeds the illusion that if you just knew more, you could move on. But knowledge doesn't heal wounds. Boundaries do. A boundary is not a punishment. It's not a dramatic exit or an ultimatum designed to manipulate someone into changing. A boundary is simply a way of protecting your peace. It's saying, I love you, but I can't keep shrinking myself to make this work. It's deciding that your emotional safety matters more than the hope that they'll finally show up differently. It's choosing to stop bleeding for someone who won't even admit they're holding the knife. Sometimes that boundary looks like ending the relationship. Sometimes it looks like taking space, not replying right away, or deciding not to re-engage in the same cycle of push and pull. And yes, it's hard, especially if you're someone who loves deeply, someone who believes in growth and second chances. But here's the thing, boundaries don't mean you've stopped loving them. They mean you've started loving yourself too. When you prioritize boundaries over explanations, you shift the power dynamic. You stop trying to decode someone else's behavior and start honoring your own emotional truth. You stop explaining yourself to someone who was never really listening and start building a life where your needs aren't up for debate. You move from self-sacrifice to self-respect. And with each boundary you set, you get stronger. You begin to realize that closure doesn't come from someone else explaining their choices. It comes from you accepting that their choices are no longer yours to carry. You let go of the fantasy version of them, and you deal with who they actually are. That clarity is painful, but it's also a gift. Because once you stop trying to explain the unexplainable, you free up space in your life for someone who doesn't make you beg for consistency. Healing isn't passive. It's not something that happens while you wait. It's something you claim, moment by moment, through the boundaries you draw and the decisions you make to choose peace over confusion, self-worth over self-doubt. There's a belief many people carry, often without realizing it, that love must be chaste, that the person who's hard to get, emotionally distant, or inconsistent must somehow be more valuable. So when you fall for someone avoidant, someone who pulls away just when things feel close, it can activate something deep inside you. You start to feel like you have to earn their love, to prove yourself, to do more. You tell yourself that if you can just show them how patient, loving, and loyal you are, they'll finally come around. But love that needs to be chased isn't love that will last. It's love that keeps you anxious, exhausted, and doubting your own worth. Real connection doesn't require you to constantly prove that you're worthy of it. It doesn't make you feel like you have to shrink, stretch, or shape-shift just to be accepted. And yet, when you're caught in a dynamic with someone avoidant, that's exactly what often happens. You end up waiting for scraps of affection, hoping that every small sign of interest is a breakthrough, a signal that things are finally changing. But those breadcrumbs don't lead to closeness. They lead to emotional depletion. It's not your job to chase someone into readiness. Readiness is a choice. It's not something you can inspire in someone simply by being good enough. Avoidant partners often need space, not because you did anything wrong, but because they struggle with vulnerability. That struggle is theirs to confront, not yours to fix, solve, or carry. The truth is, when someone has to lose you to value you, they were never fully connected to you in the first place. And even if they do come back after you've walked away, that doesn't mean the relationship is suddenly safe or healthy. Often, it's just the cycle repeating. The chase begins again, the hope returns, but so does the inconsistency. One of the hardest lessons is realizing that walking away isn't giving up. It's reclaiming your peace. It's saying, I don't have to convince anyone to choose me. When you stop chasing, you start choosing. You start choosing yourself, your well-being, your need for emotional security. You stop making their avoidance your mirror and start seeing it for what it is, a defense mechanism that you didn't cause and can't cure. This shift is powerful. Because the moment you stop running after love, you start attracting something better. Love that's mutual, secure, and consistent. Love that doesn't make you anxious about every text message, every quiet moment, or every missed call. You deserve someone who meets you in the middle, not someone who watches you do all the work from a distance. The kind of love that lasts doesn't come with confusion. It comes with clarity. It's not about the thrill of pursuit, about the comfort of presence. And when you stop chasing the wrong kind of connection, you finally create space for the right kind of love to find you. Thank you for showing up for yourself by listening today. Thank you for being brave enough to feel, to learn, and to grow. And remember, love doesn't require you to abandon yourself. The right love brings you home to yourself. Take care of your heart. It's always been worthy. Thank you and goodbye.